Bert, let's talk about the Patriots and where they stand after beating the Bengals on Sunday. This week, Zoe has started to talk about how 3-0 is on the table for these New England Patriots, starting with the Seattle Seahawks home opener Sunday. So we got to take it one game at a time. But how much should we buy into what the Patriots did on Sunday, and what will it mean the next couple of weeks?
I mean, I think what it means is that, like, they have a path to winning, and that I'd say like the formula that Gerard Mayo set out for his team at the start of the offseason program is there. He wanted a physical team. He wanted a run game that could support a rookie quarterback and shorten games. He wanted to lean on his defense. I like, one of the big questions for me was like how they were going to use like the Belichick specific parts, right? Like, I think you can look at like Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers and Marte Mapu, like guys like that, like Jelani Tavai, that were like really kind of like these hybrids that were always more valuable to build than the rest of the league. And a couple of those guys played really well, so I still think the path to victory on a week-to-week basis is a narrow one, because that style of play isn't going to hold up against every team. But I think they put themselves in a position to compete. And I think one of the most impressive things, guys, and Zoe, you can talk to this, is like how they managed the offensive line issue in game. Like, we've talked a lot about like the makeup of the staff, and in particular the offensive staff. It seems like they did a pretty good job of it, like getting Chuck Okorafor out of there, and getting Lowe in there when they did, and then managing that over the course of the game. What Jacoby did to manage the problem, I think they actually did a really good job with that.
Yeah, and I thought they were real multiple on defense, and I think that's the one that's really going to carry them, because you got the most carryover, you got most starters back there. I thought Gonzalez played well in this game, getting Jonathan Jones back at a high level. He makes that tackle on 4th and 2. But my point was, like, if you tackle that way every week, and if you don't make stupid mistakes like false starts, holding penalties at the 10-yard line, and just have Jacoby manage it, because they worked their asses off on special teams. So Jeremy Springer didn't have great special teams with the Rams. But he came here and it was different. They're doing different things. Like Joe Cardona is running down on their punts now.
Yeah.
He never did that.
I think that was the first time I've ever seen Joe Cardona.
It's the first time he's ever done it.
Make a tackle down there,
But it's like, they're like, well, why are we running him down? Oh, well, he's not the most athletic guy. He just kind of hangs back and becomes a safety. Shoot, let him snap it and go. He's got a free release. So that type of stuff, that is good coaching. And I watched their sideline. I watched ours. That team was gassed. They were out of shape. Mm-hmm. They didn't have answers. Didn't look like they cared to be there. It looked like a preseason game for them. I'm
glad you said that, so, because I think, like, any of us if you followed football your whole life, you can like see the energy of a team. Like, when like really early on in a game, you can kind of see the energy from a team, and kind of the way they're coming off the ball, and like how they're acting after plays, and like the urgency with which they're playing. And that looked like a really like there was a real urgency to the style of play, to the way those guys were carrying themselves out there. Here's the other thing, is like one thing you want to see with the new coaching staff is how are your best players playing? Like, are your best players playing well? And they got a great effort out of Ramondre Stevenson. I think Hunter Henry played well. Christian Gonzalez played well. Jabril Peppers played well. Keon White, who was one of their best players in camp, he played well. So that's the other part of it. They're not the most talented team in the league. They're far from that. But like, I think the other thing you saw is all the guys who were their best players either last year or through training camp, that all translated over onto the game field, which again, I think is a feather in the cap of the coaching staff.
All right, we got Bert Breer with us, 617-779-0985. We've also been talking, Bert, and we've got all kinds of phone calls on the line about it, and that's related to the Hall of Fame discussion surrounding Robert Kraft. Curious to get your thoughts on that story yesterday and what stands out to you, and if you think Robert Kraft will soon be in the Hall of Fame.
I think there was a little piece of that story that was important that, like, I don't know how much you guys have pulled it out, which is that separating these guys from the coaches should help Robert Kraft. Like, Robert Kraft definitely deserves to be in. Does he deserve to be in over Mike Shanahan? I don't know. I mean, like, it seems like Mike Shanahan's offense is like being run by half the league right now, so who's had a bigger impact? So I think like being separated from the coaches really helps. And I do look, this has been like the worst kept secret in football for the last few years. Like the story that Don wrote, like that's everybody know, like people who've been around Hall of Fame people, they know that like this sales job has been going on for quite some time. And I think in my experience is that a lot of times when you push really hard on things like that, it can backfire because people get sick of hearing from you. And it's not going to be like a deciding factor, but if there's a close call, they may say, you know what, the hell with that. I'm going to go with the other guy. I just think like that push to try and get him in. And look, like I'm not even blaming Stacy. I think Stacy's doing his job and is really good at his job. But like I do think like sometimes when the push is a little too aggressive, you're going to get pushed back from people, especially when it's an owner where things are so gray on the whole thing. I also think the timing, one thing that wasn't in the story is like the timing of everything, right? So you had those owners that got in, Dan Rooney, Jerry Jones, and Pat Bowlen. I think that there was a good chance Robert Kraft was going in the year after Bowlen, and then Orchids of Asia happened. And I do think there were some people on the committee who were like, well, we can't put him in this close to that having happened, So like, let's just wait a year or two, and sometimes when that happens, a guy can get lost in the shuffle a little bit. So I think the timing of all of that was an issue for Robert. And I think that, the aggressive push, from the Patriots organization to get him in and not being transparent about some of those things probably has hurt him as well.
We'll get some of your calls on this with Bert, who, again, joins us from Miami ahead of Thursday night football tonight. John's in Scituate. Hey, John.
Yeah, the idea of Bob Kraft thinking he deserves a yellow jacket when Bill Parcells doesn't have a red jacket is audacious.
Okay, I don't know.
There's two totally different.
I know there are two different circumstances. Yeah,
a line to be drawn between those two things.
I mean, I do think though, guys, don't you like I think that like another mistake people are making is like this isn't really about the other owners. This is about like the 50 guys who are voting. You know what I mean? Like the other owners, maybe they can exert influence, but they don't really decide who goes in and who doesn't. You know what I mean? And it's interesting because I just think it's like the legacy of an owner is so fickle. It's not like a coach or a player where they have a certain amount of championships and wins affixed to them. Like it's just sort of, there's like a gray area in how responsible they are for these things, And, and I think it happened like a couple of these guys' legacies like really went in a different direction. Like I think Eddie DeBartolo, like, I mean, Zoe, when you were playing, he was seen as like first class, like, like one of the greatest owners in the history of sports.
Top shelf.
And then like now all anybody thinks about is like the riverboat thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like these guys' legacies are so fickle. What they're remembered for is so much different than a coach or player is remembered.
It was him, Carmen Policy, and John Galecka, the big agent, that they came back for that Montana day when Joe was honored. And Eddie would do anything for all the players. It's sort of like a Kraft thing. And everybody loved the guy. Mm-hmm. And then that riverboat stuff hit, and we never saw him again.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any question he deserves to be in. And I think this has been a matter of not if, but when. Like, I think he will get in. But I just think, like, the little things, it's even like the need for credit on things, Like, I covered the lockout day to day, right? So here's an example. I covered the lockout day to day. I was out there, as you guys know, I was there for 5 months covering that thing, for NFL Network, right to left, up and down. And like Robert was huge in getting that deal done. There's no question about it. But like, so was Clark Hunt. And you never hear about that, right? Like, but Clark Hunt was the guy who kind of came up with the economic system that the players wound up accepting because he has like great background in finance, worked for Goldman Sachs and all of that. So like, I think that sometimes people are turned off a little bit when they feel like even if somebody does something good, they're reaching for credit for it,
Yeah.
And like I do think like, and I'm not criticizing Robert for it, but I do think like there have been circumstances like that where you can choose to go one way or the other. You can stand in the background or you can put yourself out front. And sometimes people are turned off when you're constantly putting yourself out front.
You got a phone call from the head coach of the Patriots after the win in Cincinnati. That's nice, Bert. That was kind of him to check in with you after the win. Make sure he gave you a ring.
Was a good conversation. He, I mean, look, like you got to give. I think you got to give him a ton of credit because that team played the way he wanted it to play. And like they had a very defined vision for what they wanted to be and what they were going to have to be. And like the cool part about it is, too, guys, like I think ultimately this winds up being a team that can support a rookie quarterback if it can continue to play that way. So if there comes a point in November or December where they're out of it, they're playing a style that's conducive to helping a rookie quarterback along. But yeah, man, like it was funny because I asked him about all the criticism he's gotten because I do feel like he and his coaching staff have gotten a lot. And I had someone else.
Of course, you feel that way.
I had someone else on that. I had someone else say about the criticism locally. Well, God, shouldn't they let us actually F this thing up before they tell us how effed up we are? And I think it was kind of the interesting point, right? Like they were pretty heavily criticized without really doing anything wrong yet, right? So I don't know. I mean, I think that there was a lot of people in that locker room on that coaching staff that had a chip on their shoulder about the way that they were regarded, and I think it showed on Sunday.
You think they were hearing it, huh? Obviously, right?
I mean, I asked Gerard if he was hearing it. He said no.
Not to the point they're going to take the seats.
He said no, but like what he said was, he's like, I know the players did. He's like, because the players have wives and they have girlfriends and they have friends and they have all these people around them that are listening, that are reading, and so stuff gets back to them.
Coming off the field, Bert. What do they got now? Oh, how about the disrespect now? What they going to say now? One after the other. It started with Godjaw. Peppers was doing it. They were all doing it. Yeah. Disrespect.
I mean, in fairness, like, isn't that true though?
Someone should tell them they're picked to lose in every game. Right.
But they've been heavily criticized without actually going out there and playing a game.
That's fair.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like it is. I mean, it's just like that's the part I think that bugged some people there was like that they have been raked over the coals for the last 2 months locally without ever having played a game under Gerard Mayo. So like for all of the things that we looked at and watched, like I actually thought like in the preseason, and I don't think this is going to be, don't get me wrong. They aren't going to the playoffs, but like, I do think there's a fair point to be made. Like, didn't it look better week over week in the preseason? Didn't Drake May improve? Didn't the whole operation start to look more together as the summer went on? They had a really physical training camp that showed up in week one.
I thought in Washington when they couldn't get their offensive linemen to line up, they looked like a smooth operating. They were, absolutely. Cue up
I'm sorry if I'm knocking down your criticism here, but like the rookie quarterback looked pretty
good. I'm telling you, the criticism was valid. That's what I'm telling you. I'm telling you that no, they did not look like a well-coached team in some of those preseason games. They did not look like a well-coached team when their offensive line was getting destroyed against the Eagles in a joint practice. What we had to look at all summer wasn't good, Bert. So
that, but
what happened Sunday was good, and it's obviously way more valuable than anything that happened in that camp, and that's why all week everyone's been saying nice things about them.
And like, let's put that in context, though. The Eagles might have the best defensive line in football. Right. Like, so the Eagles have Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Bryce Huff and Brendan Graham. And like, they've traditionally been like over like a 20-year period, they've had one of the best defensive line groups in football consistently over and over and over again. And on Sunday, you were playing a team that was adjusting to not having DJ Reader anymore, that had Trey Hendrickson missing a huge piece of training camp, that, it's just, like, I think this is what it's going to be on a week-to-week basis. And I actually think that's okay.
Sounds like you're not buying in on that performance. I can tell you this, out of all the things that happened
I think it's relative to, like, who they're playing against. You know what I mean? Like, I picked the Bengals to be in the Super Bowl, so they get full credit for beating the Bengals. But there were some circumstances there, too. Like, Jamar Chase hasn't had a training camp. T. Higgins didn't play. Marius Mims, who has won their right tackle job. Like he wasn't out there because he's hurt, so they had Trent Brown in that spot. And look, that's nothing against the Patriots.
No, but you get all those guys, and then where's Zach Taylor not having his team ready to play?
Right, and I like
they were dead ass in the water, Bert. I know Chase was
that's been a historic thing with them. Like for some reason,
that's a problem.
As good as they've been, they went to a Super Bowl, a conference title game last year. They were competitive even after losing Joe Burrow. So on balance, Zach Taylor's done a good job there. But for some reason, they can't get out of their own way the first couple of weeks of the season. It's a very fair criticism.
I think the thing from Sunday, Bert, that is still going to come back and haunt them is the play of their offensive line. I don't think it was good, and by every statistical measure, they sucked. They couldn't block when Ramondre Stevenson was carrying the ball. They couldn't block to protect their quarterback, who was hit a lot in that game.
Yep.
They couldn't do it. It's a thing that's going to sink them. That's going to prevent them from scoring points all year long.
I think they managed it as best they could. And I think like having, again, like a left tackle switch, a rookie out there starting at guard, right? Like all of those moving parts. You have Nwanu out there playing a position he wasn't playing for most of the summer, right? Like, so, I just like look at the totality of it, and this is something that's you're not going to snap your fingers and fix that. So you're going to have to manage it on a week-to-week basis. And I think that's one of the reasons why Jacoby, I think there's the element of like, I think Gasper uses the line crash test dummy, right? Like it's better he takes the hits than Drake May. I think there's that element, but I think there's also the element of like, how fast are you processing everything? Are you up to the speed of the NFL? Can you manage those problems? Can you get rid of the ball when the rush is coming? Can you feel the rush? Like there are all those sorts of things that I think if you're going to be competitive with that offensive line issue, it really helps to have an experienced quarterback.
Hey, if you like that clip, check out more videos from Zolak and Bertrand right here. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.